Hi, I'm Carrie Good from Stroma Building Control. I've been in the building control industry for 8 years now, and I am going to be going through the changes to building regs following on from the Grenfell Inquiry. So as you can appreciate, there have been a lot of updates to the fire safety industry. So this is going to be quite a whistle-stop tour in terms of what some of these changes have been, just to highlight what the key points are. So we will be looking at some of the updates to Part B, which is the building regulations, the introduction of the new Building Safety Act, which took place in 2022, the introduction of the new role of the Building Safety Regulator, and what this means for the future of building control. So there have been quite a lot of changes to Part B following the incident in 2017. So Part B itself hasn't been updated since 2007. So as you can imagine, there was quite a lot of updates that need to be included in the 2019 edition. So initially, there was some clarification around Class 0. So this was misunderstood in the industry as a combustibility rating. This is not a combustibility rating and instead refers to surface spread of flame. So Class O equates to the Euroclass equivalent of BS3D2, which is not combustible. So for high-rise buildings, they needed to be non-combustible, whereas B is in the range of limited combustibility. So obviously that is not acceptable. So it's a bit of clarification around that. And it was just making sure it was crystal clear that we are using Euro codes, which is A1, A2, B, and C. So A1 is what you are aiming for with a high-rise, high-risk building. That is non-combustible within the UK. A2 is classed as non-combustible in Scotland. B, C, and D are in the range of limited combustibility, so they're considered acceptable for lower buildings. And E and F are high combustibility, so we should not be looking for those. There are the S1, S3, and S2 parts of the A-class rating, which refer to the smoke development. So obviously S1 is low smoke development leading up to S3, which is high smoke. And you also have D, so D0, D1 and D2, which are referring to the formation of flaming droplets. So obviously when you saw the video of Grenfell, you saw the large elements dropping off the building, that would have been the D rating. So obviously the lower the class of that, the better. So D means D0 practically means no flaming droplets. D2 is obviously the highest rate of flaming droplets that is permitted. So you would be aiming for as lower class as you can in your S and your D ratings, and obviously A1 for your high-rise residential. So Class 0 was initially introduced in 1991, and it was actually replaced in 2000, but this wasn't made clear in the current edition of Part B. Obviously, that's been set out a lot clearer in the 2019 edition. It also made it absolutely crystal clear that combustible cladding is not legal in high-rise buildings over 18 metres. So again, going back to the Euroclass codes, it's A1. You're only allowed in your high-risk, high-rise buildings. And there was also the addition of wayfinding signage. So a lot of times when you're going up through a large building, I found it on a few myself. You're going up and down floors and you don't know where you are once you've gone down on up. So, for example, there was one I did where there was about 4 or 5 basement stories. So you could just literally continue going down unless there was any kind of sign in the stair. You might accidentally end up getting trapped in the basement. So wayfinding signage at stair cores on every floor was actually made part of the 2019 edition, basically to eliminate that. So there was a further update again in 2020, which brought the threshold for sprinklers from 30 metres down to 11 metres. So obviously that's a lot of impact in a lot of new buildings that were made from them. So that was those updates. There were some further changes in June of 2022. So there was some reclassification of the purpose groups. So before the high-rise residential mostly included your big flats, your big blocks of flats. So it was clarified again last year to include places of lawful detention, hospitals, any kind of home, schools or similar establishments where people may sleep on the premises, living accommodation for treatment, care or maintenance of disabled persons, persons under 5, or any, again, school or similar establishments, and also lawful detention. So this would include care homes and those of the like. However, they are only considered an HRRB if they hit the threshold of over 11 metres. So that's the clarification on that. So you often wouldn't get a school or a care home or even a hospital in that range. But obviously, if they were to reach that height, then they would be covered under the changes of 2022. So a couple of the diagrams that were updated in 2022, again, I'm not going to run through all of them because they're quite a lot, but the key ones I found when I was reviewing were the fire resistance around external stairs, just clarifying a few bits around what doors need to be fire doors, what the levels are of fire resistance around these. There was also clarification around travel distances within a flat and also within the corridors. So just to tie in again with the high-rise residential, just making sure it's quite clear within the guidance what is acceptable and what isn't. Some other changes, there were some clarifications around fire resisting edges and junctions. So there were some confusions around cavity barriers. So there was a few changes identified in there, which just tried to make it a bit clearer for anyone trying to read through the guidance. And it was clarified around the protection of openings and also fire stopping details as well. So that was the aim of that, was to make sure those items were a bit clearer from the future editions. There was also changes around what the external wall will look like, including specified attachments. So anyone who is in building control will remember in the last few years there's been a lot of debate around balconies, anything fixed to the wall, whether cavity trays themselves had to be non-combustible or whether they're acceptable to be standard membranes, and even air bricks have been brought into that debate because they are part of the wall fabric. So they had to be completely non-combustible as well. So there's been a vast review of all the construction details, basically to whatever is on the facade of a high-rise residential. So there's a lot of changes within the last few years to digest. Another thing that was brought out was the Building Safety Act. So as you are probably all aware, Dame Judith Hackett did a very detailed review of the building regulations and obviously the Grenfell incident itself, and she put together a big document based on what her recommendations were, which was basically what brought the Building Safety Act 2022 to light. So this was eventually granted royal assent in April of last year. Obviously, there are still some consultations going on around some of the minutiae for the Building Safety Act. It's still very much a brand new document. It isn't embedded in any way, shape or form as yet. So you will need to stay tuned basically to what's going on with that, because it is constantly evolving. There are changes almost daily regarding this. So the fundamental fact of the Building Safety Act was to give some more power to residents of homeowners. So one of the large findings from the Grenfell Inquiry was that homeowners felt like they were left completely out of the loop when they raised concerns to the landlords and the powers that be. They felt like they weren't being listened to with their concerns to fire safety. Building Safety Act helps to give them back some power, so that obviously if they have issues, they can raise them to the people who need to be aware. So hopefully that will, obviously because they're living in the building day to day, they'll be much more aware of any issues potentially than someone who's coming in to do a review or a survey. Another thing that was brought in was the creation of a brand new role of the building safety regulator. So they'll be working under the HSE. And basically they will be the one person who will be looking after high-rise residential buildings who fall into the category that we are reviewing. So this is currently live. It's being phased in incrementally. Gateway 1 is now live as of August 21. So this takes place at the planning stage. Any buildings which fall into the class that we're reviewing under this, they will have to go through Gateway 1 now, which will be reviewed by the building safety regulator at planning stage, basically, so that they can determine that the building will be safe, obviously, before it goes to site. Gateway 2 is live within 12 to 18 months of royal assent, so that's within 12 to 18 months of April 2022. And that basically replaces the plans assessment stage with your building control body. So when this happens, basically the only person who can assess your plans before it goes to site will be the building safety regulator. So they'll completely replace your local authority, completely replace your approved inspector. We'll go into a bit more detail about what that means for those as the slides progress. But that is how that will work for those sorts of projects. So this will be a complete stop in the construction process. Literally, you can't progress until they have reviewed it and sent back that they are happy to approve the designs. So you literally can't start on site until that has been carried out. And then finally, Gateway 3 will be live again within 12 to 18 months of Royal Assent, which again is 12 to 18 months of April 2022. And that will be the completion stage. As far as I'm aware from the information I've received, I think this is going to be around April next year that this will be live. So obviously we're all kind of working towards getting this in place. So again, that's going to replace the whole sign-off process. Again, only the building safety regulator can do that for those projects, and they'll basically be compiling all the information they received from the plan stage, all the information they received from their subsequent site visits, and just making sure that everything is in place for that building to be operational. So to go into a bit more detail about the building safety regulator, so this is a new role, completely new role that has been formed. I'm sure you've probably seen there's been job applications flying around LinkedIn and all sorts of places trying to get people to fill this job. It has been working in a shadow form up until April 2021, and it is now live, operational more or less at Gateway 1 stage. They are now reviewing schemes. Obviously, for ones that are commencing on site or already on site, they can continue with your local authority building control or your approved inspector, whoever you've appointed. But the building safety regulator will get to have their say at the planning stage. So they are very much wanting everything to be very rigid. There isn't much scope around flexibility in terms of deviation from the prescribed guidance in BS 9991 or 9999. Everything has to be set out as per the standards, and you have to have a very, very good justified reason to deviate. So that is how they're functioning at the moment. Obviously, as they get up to speed, that may change. Your guess is as good as mine at this stage. So they are reviewing schemes at Gateway 1, but again, if you are already on site, if you've already gone through the plan stage, you will proceed with your building control body. So they have three major functions. So the first function is to oversee the safety and performance system for all buildings, which also includes advising ministers on changes to building regs and also managing the performance of building control bodies. So basically, they have the power as fit to amend building regulations. Obviously, if they, in the progress of doing their job, they find that there's key issues, they have the power to implement changes in that. And obviously, they will be reviewing the building control body. So LABC, approved inspectors, obviously making sure that everyone is working to the same sort of guidelines, and making sure that everyone's qualified and competent to undertake the plan checks and inspect the work as well, and obviously sign the work off. So they will also be working with assisting and encouraging the improvement of competence within the built environment industry, and especially among building control professionals. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware that there are new competency requirements for all building control professionals. This hasn't officially been set out in its final form as yet. It's very much speculation, but it will need to be in place by October this year, I believe. So I'm sure we will be hearing a little bit more information on that as the weeks progress. But basically, everyone who currently works in building control was looking to work in building control. They're going to have to go through a set of mandatory tests to prove whether they're level 1, level 2, level 3. Basically, each level shows what level of experience they have. So obviously level 1s will be very minor works, maybe your small fit out schemes. Level 2, maybe some new builds. Level 3, they may be approved to work on consulting for these high-rise schemes. So obviously, as you can appreciate, there probably won't be enough building safety regulators in the country to manage all of the work with the high-rise buildings. So they will still be recruiting LABC and approved inspectors to work as consultants. So that means that you can appoint one of these persons to review the works, and then obviously they have to submit that through to the building safety regulator, who can then say that they're satisfied with the review, and then they can approve it. Again, this is something that's still being set out, so it's very much speculation. And again, I'm sure we will all find out a bit more as the weeks progress. And they will be also leading implementation of new and more stringent regulatory regime for high-risk buildings. So again, to reflect what I said at the beginning of this slide, they're coming in quite regimented. They're very limited on the deviations they can accept. It literally has to comply with the tried and tested dimensions standards set out. And again, as I say, this may change as it progresses. We will find out as it goes forward. So what this means for the building control industry as a whole, it's going to be a complete overhaul, which I personally think is not a bad thing. Basically, it's going to be making sure that everyone who works in this industry is up to date with what they need to know. They're completely competent and they're working on jobs that they are experienced and ready to do. Obviously, if the people are looking to progress, they will have to go back and do like level 2 and level 3 tests, just to show that they have the competence to work on these high risk schemes. So the building safety regulator is going to provide oversight of all of these high-rise residential and other in-scope buildings. As I said before, other competent building control professionals, either registered as a company or through as an individual, they can provide the consultancy, but they will have to go back to the building safety regulator, who will approve that through the gateways. They've got the investigatory powers if building control bodies breach any operation standards. So again, if there's any kind of local authority or an approved inspector who are repeatedly making the same mistakes, building safety regulator will go in there, obviously investigate what's going on and fundamentally just correct the issues. I mean, that's all we're looking for really as the industry. We need to get out of the finger pointing and we need to just make sure that we're all working to the same hymn sheet. So as I say, I'm looking at it as a good thing. We've all got an opportunity to get up to speed, know what our level of experience is, as I find it much more dangerous not knowing what you don't know. Whereas if you know what you don't know, you have the power to then change that and go ahead and learn that. So I see this as only good things for the industry, if I'm honest. And subsequent to that, anyone who doesn't meet the standards can be deregistered. So there obviously is a big obligation there for companies to get the qualifications needed for their staff, get themselves registered, get the individuals registered, and maintain that standard. So obviously continual CPD, continually making sure that everyone's up to date. As I say, that there's building regs changes every 5 minutes. It's quite hard to stay on top. But that is what we have to do if we're working in this industry. So that is something we have to accept. Also, the whole building regulatory scheme regime will be independently reviewed every 5 years to make sure it's fit for purpose. So that is something brand new, something, again, I see as very, very good for the industry, because previously it's been the stable door sort of attitude where we only do something when the horse is bolted. If we are doing something every 5 years, we are continually making sure that it is still fit for purpose, that people are still fit and competent to carry out these jobs, because they are ultimately looking after people's lives. It's not just doing it for fun, especially, with fire safety. There's no joking around with it. We need to make sure that we're all up to speed and we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So I do see that as a really good thing. And I think that this is going to be really good for the building control industry as it moves forward. And that is pretty much all I've got so far, just because there is just vast amounts of information. And as I say, it's all changing quite frequently. So this is where we are at so far. Thank you very much for your attention and thank you for attending.
So thanks, Carrie, for your presentation on building regulations post-Grenfell. It's a topic that is still very much centre stage in the industry. So you spoke about the building regulation changes in the UK, but Grenfell shocked the world. Do you think these UK regulations will instigate an international collaboration for change?
I'd like to think so. I mean, obviously, as everyone's aware of the earthquakes in Turkey at the moment, there's a big need for upgrades worldwide, because the buildings there have been shown to have very bad, disproportionate collapse levels. I think from their perspective, they can almost buy out of doing building regulations. I'm not sure about all the details on that 100%, but as far as I can see, that shouldn't be so, we shouldn't be able to buy out of safety. And I'm pretty sure there was another big fire over in Dubai not that long ago as well. So yeah, I really do hope that this does bring forward the need to keep the Building Safety Act alive and introduce sort of levels of that across the world, because it's definitely something we can all benefit from. And as I say, I don't think that we should be given the option to buy ourselves out of safety and keeping people safe. I really think that we should be definitely taking this forward and prioritizing the people who have to use these buildings.
So you also spoke about the building safety regulator. So how does a new construction project, so say for example a high-rise residential building, get a building safety regulator allocated?
So I think this is still very much up in the air. I'm not sure that they have the ability to appoint someone per se. I think they're trying to remove the whole you can choose who you want part of that out of the process, which I think is quite good, because we've had the days where you pick someone because you know them, you've got a good relationship, which has worked. But again, I'm not sure if that is obviously the best option. So I think at the moment as it stands, when it reaches Gateway 2, the HSE will just allocate a building safety regulator. So, you apply through them, and then they say, right, you've got this chap, and you don't really have much say in that. So I think, as I say, this is very much evolving. But as far as I'm aware, that's how it stands at the moment.
As we're in the early stages, it'll be very interesting to see how things develop through each gateway. So lastly, as a new speaker to Fire by Live, what drew you to this conference and what drew you to wanting to speak here?
Well, fire safety is such an important part of building life. I mean, not just at the use of the building, it's during the construction. And I think, taking events like Grenfell has very much brought it to the forefront. And that's where I think it really belongs to be. It's, you literally can't put a price on that. So, I'm just really interested in becoming part of the change. Like, I'm really keen to get forward and bring myself up to speed and watch the industry get up to speed, so that we can try and put these events in the past. But again, when I say put them in the past, doesn't mean forget them by all means. We need to make sure that we never forget, we keep learning. It's continually learning. As I say, like, this whole process is just evolving every day. So that, every day is a school day, and I'm just keen to be part of that. And also I'm really interested to see what other speakers you have on as well, just so I can update myself with other parts of their knowledge.
Well, thank you for your time. We do really appreciate you being here. And if anybody has any further questions to ask Carrie around building regulations in the UK, then please do reach out to her and connect with her on the platform, and you can go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.